Alone, first wrong company, why solitude is actually your best friend. Let me ask you something most people are too afraid to confront. Would you rather be alone or be surrounded by people who drain your soul? Before you answer, pause, because this question isn't about popularity or how many followers you have or how many group chats you're in. It's about something far deeper: your peace, your clarity, your truth. And here's the paradox that we rarely talk about. In a world obsessed with connection, with likes, with being constantly in touch, solitude has become a radical act, an act of rebellion, an act of self-awareness. And when we compare being alone to being in the wrong company, the truth emerges like a whisper that turns into a thunderclap. Solitude isn't loneliness, it's liberation. We live in a culture that glorifies being surrounded. You're not considered normal unless you're part of a crowd. You're not successful unless you're networking, brunching, collaborating, or constantly engaging. But let's be honest, how often does that crowd truly reflect who you are? How often do those conversations nourish your growth? How many of those connections actually make you feel seen? More often than not, the wrong company isn't malicious, it's just misaligned, and being misaligned constantly, slowly erodes your spirit. You smile when you don't want to. You laugh at jokes that don't feel funny. You shapeshift to fit into molds that were never made for you. And every time you do that, you lose a little piece of yourself.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
That's the danger of the wrong company. It doesn't always hurt you loudly. Sometimes it hurts you quietly, invisibly. It dulls your intuition. It clutters your mind. And the worst part? It convinces you that this is normal, that being drained is just the cost of being social, that small talk is better than no talk. But what if that's not true? What if solitude, true, intentional solitude, isn't a lack of something, but the presence of something deeper? When you're alone, you're not being pulled by other people's expectations. You're not performing. You're not editing yourself to be more likable. You're just being. And that's where it begins. That's where the inner voice, the one that's been drowned out by noise, starts to speak again. It's in solitude that you remember who you were before the world told you who to be. It's in solitude that clarity emerges, not because you're thinking harder, but because you're finally still enough to listen. Let me tell you something that changed my life. Solitude is not emptiness. It is space. Space to feel, space to reflect, space to grow. And in that space, something miraculous happens. You begin to differentiate between your voice and everyone else's. You begin to see which desires are truly yours and which were implanted by culture, by family, by fear. You begin to ask questions that cut through the fog like lightning. Who am I when no one is watching? What do I value when no one is influencing me? What kind of life do I want to live? Not to impress, but to fulfill? Those are the questions the wrong company never gives you the silence to ask. And here's the kicker. The wrong company isn't always wrong because they're bad people. Sometimes they're good people who are on a different frequency. But if you compromise your truth to match someone else's rhythm, you're not just doing them a favor, you're betraying yourself. And betrayal of the self is the most painful kind of loneliness there is. So why is solitude your best friend? Because it's the one companion that doesn't ask you to be anything other than who you are. It doesn't demand, it doesn't distract, it doesn't distort, it sits with you patiently, even when you're uncomfortable, especially when you're uncomfortable. And that discomfort is powerful because it forces you to see what you've been avoiding. The truth is, many of us run from solitude, not because we hate being alone, but because we're afraid of what will rise up in the silence. The unresolved emotions, the unfulfilled dreams, the parts of ourselves we've neglected or denied. But here's the twist. What if facing those things is the only way to heal them? What if sitting alone in a room with your own thoughts is the most courageous act you can commit? What if solitude isn't just a break from the world, but the beginning of a new one, built from the inside out? So I ask you now, and I want you to answer this honestly, not for me, but for yourself. When was the last time you were truly alone? Not distracted, not scrolling, not waiting for someone to text back, but alone with the rawness of your own existence. And what did you find there? The hidden cost of companionship, why the wrong people keep you from becoming who you really are. It's easy to believe that being with others, even if they don't completely align with us, is better than being alone. We rationalize it. We say, at least I'm not isolated, or maybe I'm just being too picky. But what we fail to recognize is that there's a hidden cost to companionship when it's with the wrong people. And that cost is you. Not all at once, not with a bang, but piece by piece. The wrong company chips away at your authenticity, your direction, your vision for who you could be. And the tragedy is that it's often so subtle, you don't even notice it happening until you look in the mirror one day and wonder, how did I become someone I don't even recognize? The wrong people don't always show up with toxicity or abuse. Sometimes they're just misaligned. Their values don't match yours, their mindset limits you, their definition of success contradicts your inner calling. And because we're social beings, we adapt, we mold, we compromise, not just in action, but in identity. We start laughing at things that don't amuse us. We pursue goals that don't truly resonate. We suppress parts of ourselves that feel too out there for the group. And over time, this quiet self-abandonment becomes normal, comfortable even. But make no mistake, it's a comfort that costs you your freedom. Have you ever felt more alone in a crowded room than when you're by yourself? That's not a failure of connection. That's your soul whispering that something is off, that the people you're surrounding yourself with are not meeting you where you truly are. And here's the real philosophical kicker. Being in the wrong company doesn't just waste your time. It distorts your timeline, it delays your evolution, it keeps you looping in patterns that aren't yours. It surrounds you with voices that drown out your own inner compass. Let's take this even deeper. Every human being has a unique potential, a kind of inner blueprint, but that blueprint doesn't unfold automatically. It needs the right environment. Like a seed needs the right soil. You might be the most brilliant thinker, artist, entrepreneur, healer, but if you're constantly surrounded by people who can't see that in you, who don't want to see that in you because it threatens their comfort, it's like trying to bloom in cement. The wrong company doesn't just fail to nourish you, it actively resists your growth. And why do we stay? Why do we tolerate environments that don't serve us? Because we're afraid. We're afraid of being misunderstood. We're afraid of conflict. But most of all, We're afraid of the void that comes after we leave. We fear solitude like it's a punishment, when really it's a portal. The space you create by walking away from the wrong people is the same space that allows the right people, the right opportunities, and the right parts of yourself to emerge. There's a brutal honesty needed here. How many relationships in your life are based on your true self, and how many are based on a version of you that's easier to digest? How many of your friendships are rooted in growth, and how many are rooted in mutual stagnation? How many people in your life would applaud your transformation, and how many would secretly resent it? These are hard questions, but they're necessary ones, because if you don't consciously choose the energy you allow near you, you'll unconsciously become a reflection of it. And if you're constantly mirroring people who are afraid to rise, you'll start to believe that rising is dangerous. But here's the truth that solitude teaches us. You don't need to be validated to be valuable. You don't need to be agreed with to be right for yourself. You don't need a circle to be whole. In fact, sometimes the path to becoming who you really are requires walking alone for a while, not because you're unworthy of connection, but because you're preparing yourself for deeper, truer, more aligned connections. Ones that don't ask you to shrink or edit or hide. So I want to challenge you with this. What would your life look like if you only allowed people into it who reflected your highest self back to you? How much more would you grow? How much more would you create? How much more would you finally feel like yourself? The sacred power of solitude. How being alone reconnects you to the universe within. There's something almost mystical that happens when we truly allow ourselves to be alone. Not just physically, but spiritually, mentally, emotionally. Not scrolling, not distracting, not numbing, but being. In that space, silence becomes a gateway. And through that gateway, we begin to hear something we've forgotten. The voice beneath all voices, the one that isn't trying to impress anyone, the one that doesn't shift with likes or opinions, the one that has always been there, waiting, watching, whispering. That voice is your essence, and it can only be heard in solitude. Solitude, when embraced intentionally, isn't a void. It's a mirror that reflects back everything you've been avoiding in the noise, your fears, your dreams, your wounds, your wisdom. At first, that reflection can be uncomfortable. We see the parts we've neglected, the dreams we abandoned, the truths we compromised, but stay with it. Sit in that discomfort, and eventually something miraculous happens. You begin to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. You begin to reclaim ownership of your mind, your heart, your destiny. You see, solitude reconnects you to the universe within, and that universe is vast. It holds your creativity, your intuition, your resilience, your longing for something more. But most of us never explore it because we're constantly tuned outward, always reacting, always comparing, always chasing. Solitude flips that script. It invites you to stop reacting and start reflecting, to stop chasing and start receiving, because when you're truly alone, you're finally open. And in that openness, life begins to speak to you in ways it never could before. Have you ever noticed how some of your deepest insights come when you're walking alone? Or how your most honest thoughts appear just before sleep, when the world fades and only your soul remains? That's not coincidence. That's consciousness uncluttered. That's your inner universe expanding into awareness, and the more time you spend in that space, the more familiar it becomes. You start to trust it. You start to realize that everything you've been seeking, validation, direction, clarity, is already within you. It's just been drowned out by the constant noise of other people's expectations. And once you tap into that inner universe, you become powerful in a way that no external force can touch. You stop looking for approval because you've already approved of yourself. You stop fearing abandonment because you've discovered the joy of your own company. You stop chasing meaning because you've realized you are meaning. This is the sacred power of solitude, not as a retreat from life, but as a return to your source. Release yourself from life, from life's love. You begin to live differently. You speak more truthfully. You create more authentically. You choose relationships more consciously, not from desperation, but from alignment. You no longer need people to fill a void because there is no void. You're full, you're whole, and paradoxically that wholeness attracts other whole people. Because like attracts like. And when you become deeply rooted in yourself, you naturally draw in those who are rooted too. And solitude doesn't just reconnect you to yourself, it reconnects you to something even larger. It reminds you that you are not separate from life, that the same intelligence animating the stars, the oceans, the forests, is flowing through you, that you are not alone in the cosmic sense. You are a thread in the great tapestry of existence. And when you sit in silence and feel that connection, not intellectually but viscerally, you realize something profound. Solitude isn't about being without others. It's about waking up to the oneness that was always there, hidden beneath the illusion of separation. So I ask you sincerely, when you strip away the noise, the roles, the expectations, what's left? Who are you really in the silence? And what would happen if you stopped running from that silence and started listening to it instead? Rebuilding from within, how solitude prepares you for deeper, more authentic connections. After all the noise fades and the silence settles in, something within you begins to rebuild, not in the way society teaches you to build, with resumes and accolades and curated social lives, but in a quieter, more profound way. Through solitude, you begin to construct a foundation that is not built on external validation, but on internal truth. And from that foundation, something sacred becomes possible. Real connection, not the kind based on convenience or fear of being alone, but the kind that arises when two people meet without masks, without roles, without needing anything from each other except presence. The irony is deep. To truly connect with others, you must first be able to sit fully with yourself, because if you don't know who you are, you'll spend your life trying to find yourself in other people. You'll chase relationships, hoping they'll fill the holes you've never dared to face. You'll confuse chemistry with compatibility. You'll mistake attention for love. You'll settle for being needed because you've never learned how to be whole. But solitude changes that. It teaches you patience. It teaches you discernment. It teaches you the difference between loneliness and longing, between desire and dependency. Here's something no one tells you. Once you've tasted the richness of solitude, your standards change. not out of arrogance, but out of reverence for your peace. You no longer tolerate shallow conversations because you've had too many deep ones with yourself. You no longer chase people who don't see you because you've already seen yourself. You no longer beg for space in someone's life because you've learned to hold sacred space within your own. And when you do choose to let someone in, it's not because you need them, but because you want to share your fullness with them. That's what makes connection powerful, not neediness, but wholeness. From this place, relationships become a mirror, not a crutch. You begin to attract people who match your energy, who respect your boundaries, who challenge your growth without threatening your essence. And you relate to them not from a place of fear, but from a place of love. Because you've done the hard work. You've sat in the fire of your own thoughts. You've endured the silence. You've met your shadows. And now you bring something rare to the world. Someone who's not afraid to be alone, and therefore someone who's fully ready to connect. So the next time you find yourself alone, don't rush to fill the space. Don't numb it, don't run from it. Sit with it, listen to it. Let it teach you, because solitude isn't the absence of life, it's the womb of it. It's where the real you is born. And from that realness, everything changes. So I leave you with this. What kind of relationships would you attract if you stopped fearing solitude and started embracing it as your greatest teacher? And are you willing to be alone long enough to find out? Now it's your turn to choose. Settle for noise or wait for resonance. The world doesn't need more connection, it needs more authentic ones. And that begins with you.